Let's start this morning with the government, and I can speak now to the Transport Secretary, Mark Harper. Good morning, Secretary of State.
Good morning, Trevor.
When the Kremlin declares that Mr. Putin's won Russia's presidential election, will the United Kingdom recognise his regime, given that it's reported that he's just tried to kill our Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps?
Well, look, the elections this weekend, are ongoing at the moment. I don't think people have any illusion about whether they're free or fair, and it's particularly reprehensible that they're trying to conduct those elections in parts of Ukraine, which is the sovereign state which Vladimir Putin has invaded. So now I think our position is very clear. We've been resolute in backing the Ukrainians against Putin. We've delivered a significant amount of aid, recently another £2.5 billion, and we're very clear in that conflict about whose side we're on. So I think our position is very clear.
Well, your position's clear, but it's not the answer to the question I asked you, which is, will we recognise the Putin regime, given that he's tried to kill Grant Shapps?
Well, look, two things. We of course, have diplomatic relations with Russia, but we make our position to them very clear about their invasion of Ukraine, and we've been the leading international nation about standing up to them and making sure the Ukrainians can win that conflict. On your specific point, it is the case that the Defence Secretary had to not conduct a visit that he had planned to Ukraine for security reasons. But our position and his position on the support that we've been giving to Ukraine is very clear. As I said, we're providing financial aid, we are providing military support and equipment to make sure the Ukrainians can triumph in that conflict, because we're very clear about whose side we're on and about the appalling behaviour of Vladimir Putin invading a sovereign country.
Yulia Navalnaya has called for us to reject the result. I think it's interesting that you haven't actually said that we will recognise it, but I guess you don't want to go any further. So let's move on to domestic politics. Let me start with something for you as a parliamentarian. Irrespective of the conventions, were you at all discomforted by the fact that Diane Abbott was not called to speak in a debate this week, which actually was all about her?
Well, look, you're talking obviously about Prime Minister's questions, and I was in Prime Minister's questions, and I saw Diane Abbott standing to catch the Speaker's eye. It did seem a bit odd that, you know, the debate in the chamber was all about her. But look, who gets called at Prime Minister's questions is not a matter for backbenchers or a matter for the government. That's entirely a matter for the Speaker. But it did seem a bit odd that the main exchange between the party leaders was about her, and she didn't get the chance to contribute. But as I said, that's entirely a matter for the Speaker, not a matter for the government.
Yeah, I get your point that it seemed a bit odd, but actually to the, you know, those of us not trained in parliamentary niceties, we might just say it was wrong. Would you say it was just wrong?
Well, look, there are rules about how Parliament works and about the balance between the two sides and who the Speaker calls. So I'm not going to start telling the Speaker how to do his job. I don't think that's appropriate for a member of the government. As I said, I do think perhaps for people at home it looked a bit odd. But look, I mean, if you want to ask the Speaker why he made the decisions he did, you know, maybe you should get him on your programme and ask him. That's a matter for him. I've said what I've said about it, and I don't really have anything more to add.
That's good advice. And, Mr. Speaker, if you're watching, any time. Now, look, Mr. Hester has given the Conservative Party £10 million. Can you confirm that the party's received another £5 million from him? And if so, when?
No, look, party makes its declaration. Look, I'm the Transport Secretary. I'm not involved with donations to the Conservative Party and the processes that we have in place to check those or to declare them. Any donations that we receive from anybody that we accept are declared in the usual way, and that's why you know that Mr. Hester made those donations in the past. And if there are any donations in the future, and that's hypothetical, the party will declare them in the proper way.
With the greatest respect and affection and everything, you are the Cabinet Minister on the morning round. There must be an answer to this. they must have told you, or are they just hiding it from you, whether or not they've got another £5 million, as is being widely reported?
We've declared in the proper way any donations that we've received. That's why people know that Mr. Hester donated money to the Conservative Party. And if in the future there are any donations, and you're asking me to speculate on hypotheticals here, there's a proper process to go through, and those donations will be declared in the usual way.
Well, you're a man of principle. If there are future donations, as a matter of principle, would you be comfortable to receive them?
Well, look, you're asking me to speculate on donations that haven't happened,
what your
that might
feelings
not
are
happen.
as parliamentarian.
Well, you're asking me about, you're asking me about hypothetical things, about what might or might not happen in the future. We have a proper process for donations and about assessing whether we should accept them. And if we accept them, we then publish the results and declare them as we're required to do in an open and transparent way. And that's how the process works. I'm not involved in that process as Transport Secretary, but that's the way the process works.
But you wouldn't, you wouldn't be embarrassed if the process ended up with another £5 million in the Conservative Party's locker? You wouldn't personally, as a Conservative Member of Parliament, Conservative Cabinet Minister, feel at all embarrassed by that?
Well, look, what you're really doing is you're just asking me the same question in a different way. You're asking me about hypothetical things that might or might not happen in the future. Look, we've got a proper process and a proper process to go through, and then things get declared in the usual way, as they were in the past, which is why everybody knows what the position is.
All right, let's talk about proper politics. We know there won't be an election on May the 2nd, as Prime Minister's told us that. You're 25 points ahead, drift in the polls. And you've got to do some things to fix that. Now, the big thing you're talking about this week is Rwanda. Can you guarantee that the first flight carrying asylum seekers to Rwanda will take off before the next election?
Well, that is absolutely our intention. As you know, we've got some more parliamentary process to do. So in Parliament tomorrow, every Conservative MP will have the opportunity to come together to vote down the amendments that were made in the House of Lords, backed by Labour peers, to weaken the legislation, to try and make sure it doesn't work. And I'm sure all of my parliamentary colleagues tomorrow in Parliament will unite to vote those down, to put the legislation back in the shape that it's supposed to be, and then I hope we can get that legislation on the statute book quickly. That will give us the powers then to make sure we can get those flights off to Rwanda. And of course, the important thing to remember is it's about having a deterrent to say to people, if you come to Britain illegally, you can't stay, so we can break the business model of those evil trafficking gangs that exploit people. And I'm confident that we will get that in place as soon as that legislation is on the statute book, which I hope to take, takes place very quickly once we've voted on it tomorrow.
But it's only a deterrent if it is clear that it is real. Let's say all your colleagues behave themselves, you get it through this week. Let me ask you again, will you guarantee that the flights will take off carrying asylum seekers to Rwanda before the next election?
Well, that is the intention. We will hopefully have the legislation in place shortly, once it's finished going through Parliament. The Home Office team has been working very hard on making sure all the operational matters are in place once that legislation is on the statute book. And we are going to work very hard to make sure that we can get those flights away as quickly as we can, to send out that message, to break the backs of those organised criminal groups. That is our intention. Obviously, there will be people that will try and challenge us and stop us, but that is our intention, and we're working incredibly hard to deliver that commitment that the Prime Minister made when he was elected.
All right, you're going to strive might and main, but you can't promise it. But you're trying to change the odds, aren't you? Is it true that you're offering £3,000 apiece for people to get on a plane to Rwanda? I know it's not part of the same scheme, but just can you confirm that asylum seekers are being offered £3,000 a go if they'll go on a plane to Rwanda to have their claims assessed there? Well,
look, the government has a range of voluntary return schemes where we try and get people to leave the country voluntarily, and they're actually quite successful. But the important thing about the Rwanda scheme that we've just been talking about is it's about those people that have come here illegally, and it's to break the business model of those organised crime groups. That is what the government's intending to do, and I say my parliamentary colleagues, I hope tomorrow, will unite to vote down the amendments passed by Labour peers in the House of Lords, get that legislation in good shape, get it on the statute book, and then we can proceed.
May I ask you about your own responsibility? You want to make it more difficult for low-traffic neighbourhoods to be imposed on residents. You're not proposing legislation. You're not forbidding local authorities to bring in the scheme. You're not threatening financial sanctions. So how are you going to make that happen?
Well, look, the key word you used there in the question was imposed. So, look, low-traffic neighbourhoods, if they are implemented in a way that's about enabling different road users to work to coexist sensibly, so drivers, walkers, cyclists and public transport, and they're done in a way that brings the local community along with them, then that's absolutely fine. But we all know there are examples of councils where the council hasn't taken its local community with them, and so the statutory guidance that we're putting in place, and by the way, the reason why we're using guidance is because that's the fastest way to make a change, much faster than legislating.
But have you come across a council?
That in place, councils will have.
But have you come across a council that has told you, oh, actually, everybody hates what we're doing, but we're going to do it anyway? They all say that they have local support.
Well, there are examples of that, because we've seen two examples recently, one in Newcastle and one in London at Streatham Wells, where the councils actually had to pull the scheme because it wasn't working, it wasn't taking people with it. In our independent report that we had done, only 18%, so less than 1 in 5 people, felt that they've been properly consulted on these schemes.
That's one or two, but there are several
what we're trying to do is, it's where councils are not.
There are several Conservative
councils are not taking their communities with them. That's the problem.
What are you doing meddling in our local affairs?
Well, what we're doing is we're providing new guidance about how councils should implement these things. No one with their hand on the heart can say that some of these schemes have not been implemented wrongly. Some councils have done it and are raising money, and the assessment is they're raising money. This is about a system that means that councils properly balance the needs of motorists and other road users, not an anti-motorist scheme. Pitting different road users against each other is not helpful and not sensible. That's what we're trying to stop. And the other political parties have nothing to say about it. We're on the side of drivers and other road users, and we think they can all coexist sensibly. That's what our guidance is about.
I'll talk to them about what they think, but let's come back to you. All of this is meant to essentially try and move the dial on polls and convince the people that you're an active government. Will Rishi Sunak still be leader of your party at the next general election?
Yes, he will, and he'll take us into that election, and he'll set out very clearly that we're a government with a plan. The plan is working. We're driving down inflation. We're reducing people's taxes. We are going to have the answers for the challenges facing the country in the future. We're the only party that's got a plan to deal with the priorities of the country. He'll take us into that election. He'll set out the choice, and I'm confident when he sets out the choice between our party with a plan, a Labour Party without a plan, that will get that support from the public. I'm going to be supporting him all the way through, and I'm confident that my colleagues will.
Well, a lot of your colleagues are not confident about this. According to today's briefings, and frankly, you only have to walk through the lobby to have this in your ear hole. There are MPs who think it would be a good idea to dump Mr Sunak and replace him before an election with Penny Mordaunt. I take it you don't agree, so what would you say to those people?
Well, look, what I would say to all of my colleagues is this. I spend my time as Transport Secretary focusing on doing what I think is the right thing for the country, making decisions that I think are sensible. That is the approach that the Prime Minister takes as well. He focuses on making the right decisions, even if in the short term they're not necessarily popular. He had to make tough decisions when he became Prime Minister to get inflation down from 11.1% down to 4%. I'm confident those decisions will pay off. We've seen already in the last two autumn statement and budget, because we took those decisions, we were able to reduce taxes
is the
through this year.
And some of your colleagues are looking at losing their jobs.
Well, through this year, I think we will see, and we see from the forecasts already, inflation continuing to fall, people getting pay rises ahead of inflation, and I think that backdrop will mean that when we get to the election, people will look at the positive things that we've delivered, they will look at the risks from a Labour Party that doesn't have a plan and has been clear that when it has a choice, it will put up spending and put up taxes rather than cut it, and people will make the right decision.
I hear that, Mr. Harper, but you gave us a 2% tax cut in autumn, another 2% tax cut last few weeks. The polls have not moved. I mean, history's against you here, isn't it? Mr. Callaghan in 1979, Mr. Major in 1997, Mr. Brown in 2010 held out until the last moment in the hope that something's going to turn up. They all bottled an early election and they all got walloped. What's going to be different about you?
Well, first of all, the Prime Minister made it quite clear at the beginning of the year that he expected, his working assumption was the election was going to be at the end of the year. So all this sort of froth we've had about an election being in May was always nonsense, frankly, and he made that clear at the beginning of the year. Look, we've got a plan. Things don't change overnight, but I think colleagues looking at it can see we've got a plan. Politics is a team game. People can see we've got a plan. The plan is working. We've driven down inflation. As I said, we've already talked about our plan to get the Rwanda legislation on the statute book to stop the boats. We've made considerable progress, reduction of 30% in people coming here compared to what's happening in Europe where those numbers are going up. The plan is working. I think colleagues need to have some confidence that it will deliver and we'll set out that choice at the election, and I'm confident that we'll win.
Mark Harper, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Trevor.